Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to the deputies for the North East District, or the East District. I'll introduce the candidates, starting from my left, Rose Binney, Faye, Carolyn Labbe, Philip Leclerc, Steve Luce and Piers Songo. It's the candidates that run this meeting. I've just facilitated. They've agreed between them that they will speak initially for up to 10 minutes. I'll then invite questions from the audience, and they'll have up to 2 minutes to answer those questions. Many of you will have been here the other night. I'll only accept questions that could reasonably be answered by all of the candidates. So you can't ask a question directly at one candidate. All of the candidates must be able to answer the questions. For those of you not here the other night, our timekeeper, Darren, at the end, is shortly to become our new Parish Secretary. He starts next Monday, but he's very kindly agreed to come again to be our timekeeper. So the meeting will end at 9 o'clock. Or before, if we've run out of questions. So I will now invite Rose Binney to speak.
Sorry, thank you. Good evening. As some of you will already know, I have spent most of my life in the agricultural industry, working together with my brother Tom. In 2014, we retired from agriculture, but have continued to work together. We have interests in commercial and residential property and also have 2 small businesses. I have a long-standing interest in mental illness issues, and in 2020 co-founded the charity Focus on Mental Illness, and am an actively involved trustee. I've decided to put my name forward for election because over the last few years I've become increasingly concerned with the dreadful way in which our island is being run. The multi-million-pound OneGov project has been a disaster with no evidence of any savings. Previously recognisable departments no longer exist, and Cyril and Muckle House has been reduced to a pile of rubble whilst we pay rent for Broad Street. We need to create a values-based government and civil service that is open, honest, accountable and efficient. Politicians must be in control, and there needs to be clear lines of responsibility within every major department answerable to a competent minister. I would like to see the creation of advisory bodies to advise states members made up of people with a recognised experience in their field who are willing to give their time and advice to benefit the community. Our economy is sluggish at best, and respected political commentators are advising us that we need to kick our public spending habit, that we have a head office far too big for the amount of money we have, and that we are committing financial suicide. Yet, the outgoing government has soldiered on relentlessly with its unaffordable hospital project cited in the wrong location. Islanders are being forced from their homes, some of which are listed buildings, now destined to fall under the bulldozer. The whole process has lacked transparency, and we have all had to witness and pay for the site selection charade. I recently attended one of the Jersey Care Model roadshows. No questions were allowed, doctors were not mentioned once. However, the presenters seemed very pleased that they had organised the names of relevant island charities onto a PowerPoint slide. I left with a feeling of deep despair, that islanders would be relying on charity with little, if any, state support, especially difficult for those alone or suffering with chronic illness. Others have commented that the care model has a worrying ring of over to you. Charities, while playing a vital role, should not be providing the services that are the duty of the government. And, added to the aforementioned, we have historically low morale amongst hospital workers, as well as a chronic shortage of healthcare workers in all areas. Furthermore, 30% of the population need financial help to visit the GP, but only 10% are receiving it. There are ever-increasing waiting lists for outpatient appointments, and seemingly, unless you have the ability to pay, you can wait interminably for an operation. Yet another example of the folly of this outgoing government has been the costly campaign urging us to press the red button to show we support children, resulting in the Children's Commissioner, Deborah Macmillan, urging the government to tear up the slogans and start putting children's rights into mainstream government thinking. We need to put a stop to the unchecked abuse of power, to the disgraceful way that hard-working people are treated if they dare to speak out if they disagree. We also need to ask ourselves why the island has found itself having to impose sanctions against allies of Vladimir Putin, when our finance chief executive tells us that all business carried out by all areas of the financial services sector is subject to Jersey's robust implementation of international crime mitigation standards. Clearly, Jersey's robust standards are not robust enough. Either that, or it is time to reset our moral compass. I've touched on only a very few of the many significant challenges that lie ahead, and I do not pretend to have all the answers. But I have spent a lifetime helping to solve difficult problems and will, if elected, do my best to gather information to be able to make informed decisions. I appreciate the comments I've made are island-focused, but if elected, I would not only seek to play an active role in sorting out the broader and more complicated issues that currently face the island, but would also strive to be a good deputy for both Grouville and St Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. Guy de Faye.
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming out on a rather miserable evening. But I think, as far as I know tonight, there's no major football match that would have kept us at home. Who am I? Well, some of you may remember that many years ago now, about 35 or 40, I used to work for Channel Television. And subsequently, I then worked for International Television News in London for a number of major companies, the most significant being the ITN World News, which I'm sad to say you can't see in the UK. But we did have 150 million viewing households in what's called our reach across the globe. So I'm quite popular in New Zealand and Fiji, interestingly, where someone actually came all the way to London to come and see me and introduced me to their child, who got the full in the studio routine with autograph photos and everything. I then went on to work for CNBC Business News, which gave me an insight into macroeconomics. And then I was working at Euronews, sort of EU CNN, in Lyon, when I became aware that things were changing in Jersey, and we were going to go to something called ministerial government, which I took exception to. And I made arrangements with the boss and said, I want to go and contest the elections. That was a senatorial one first time round. I came 7th when you had to be in the top 6. But I was prevailed upon to have a go at being a deputy. And I ended up being a deputy in St Helier, North St Helier now, for 6 years. Ironically, it was during that period that the State Assembly decided we would go for a ministerial government. And before I knew what was going on, I was a minister. I was the only deputy amongst the senators. On the first Council of Ministers, I ran a department called Transport and Technical Services, and I got jolly upset that the first Council of Ministers was nicknamed the Millionaire Council of Ministers, because I was the only one who was 950,000 quid short of the key target. Everyone else was very well set up. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to say in the 3 years, my department did an enormous amount of work, from little things. Some of you may have noticed the stainless steel beach showers that started sprouting around the yard. That was me making use of the tail end of a sea defences budget, which I was in charge of. And of course, did the energy from waste plant, the island's biggest capital project at that time and to some extent to date. Then I wasn't re-elected in 2008. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but it does seem that things seem to go downhill from there on in. And most recently, over our recent governments, things haven't been going very well, have they? And part of the problem is that we are now being run almost entirely by civil servants. And a lot of those civil servants have been fairly recently drafted in from the UK at high salaries and at high levels in our government, which is why strange things happen, such as having the new hospital design, which is the sort of thing you would see in the UK, but is entirely inappropriate for a small island like Jersey, where we have to be very careful how we use our land space. And one of the things we don't do is build £17 million new roads to get to some new facility. And we also like to take care of our people. So we don't normally insist that outpatients should have to walk up a steep hill to go and visit the new all-in-one hospital. And you have to ask the question, why are we putting all our eggs in one basket when years ago the minister of the day said we need 2 hospitals? That was Deputy Anne Pryke of Trinity. 10 years ago, we need 2 hospitals. The extraordinary thing is that this latest hospital has been reduced in size by some form of public consultation. And so with an increasing population, we're going to make it smaller. I challenge anyone to look at the plans, and you'll find that there's almost as much space allocated to car parking, because it's at the top of a hill, as there is to the hospital itself. I find the whole thing utterly bizarre, and I will attempt to stop it in its tracks and do something sensible and do something the Jersey way. Now, what else will I do? Well, 10 minutes doesn't give me enough time to cover all the various issues. Regrettably, ever since warnings were issued about controlling the population back in the mid-90s, and just to correct a voter who spoke to me this afternoon, I'm not suggesting that we reduce our population to either 80,000 or 86,000, but those were the warnings given in the mid-90s. The state's just completely ignored it. The current population has reduced, and we're now, according to the census, on 103,000 people, but it's still the same size island. And people have said to me, well, okay, price of property's gone through the roof. Well, property we know has always been expensive in this island. But there are things we will be able to do, but unfortunately this problem has gone on for so long, it's going to take several years, not to say a decade or two, to unravel where we've got ourselves to. I've heard so many people, scores, say to me, these last governments are the worst governments we've had in living memory. I have tended to agree, but I had a rethink the other day, because my mother's 91 and she was here during the German occupation. So there was one government that was way worse than anything we've had recently. And I make that apology to anyone who was also in Jersey at that time. Lots of things that can be done, but I think we have to tackle some of the big issues head on, which is population and the cost of housing. But it's not straightforward because people have made commitments, people have contracts, and for example, what point do we say to someone, we think you own too many properties? People have been entitled to buy properties if they can afford them. I would start looking at the edges, because that's where you have to start. For example, buy-to-let properties. Again, entirely reasonable approach, but maybe we should look at whether those are local people or outside investment. And similarly, let's have a really close look at the buy-to-let properties that aren't being let. I understand that there are quite large numbers of those. Now that seems to be a pretty dismal state of affairs. I've suggested a number of key issues. I have always felt that it was wrong for people, although we make exceptions for first-time buyers, that I think is part of a different problem. And the problem is pretty straightforward in my view. When you go to do a transaction of property in the Friday afternoon Royal Court, someone pays the stamp duty. And right now, that is an extra burden on people who've been saving up to improve themselves, saving up to buy a nicer property, and then get lumbered with an extra bill. I say, who walks out with the big check? They pay the stamp duty. Now, there's lots of other things we can do, but I'm afraid we're in such a difficult state of affairs that, for example, I think we actually have to ensure we have politicians who can take back control. Because at the moment, this island is not being run by your state's assembly. Over the last couple of years, I've met ministers who are so confused, they're not entirely sure what they're in charge of. That's all got to change, and it's got to change swiftly. Thank you so much for listening. I'm out of time.
Carolyn Labbe.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Carolyn Labbe. I entered politics 20 years ago, driven by a love for my parish and island. Although many of you know me already, I'd like to spend the next few minutes letting you know who I am, what drives me, and what you can expect from me if you're kind enough to elect me on the 22nd of June. I was brought up in Grouville and still live in the parish today. I therefore combine a genuine understanding of the day-to-day needs of my constituents with the knowledge, experience and ability to get things done. I stand as an independent. If we are to address the many problems facing us, the extraordinary rise in cost of living, the pandemic recovery and the darkening political climate in Europe, we need effective politicians who can work together, but most importantly, we need to be using the best talent in the Assembly to drive this island forward. My platform has always been one of service to my community, be that at parish, island or international levels. As chair of the COVID Community Task Force, I helped ensure that the most vulnerable islanders were served by voluntary and state services during the pandemic. As one of the longest-serving female deputies, I've championed efforts to increase the representation of women in public life. I also led the successful campaign to extend the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds. I've taken practical measures to support us becoming a greener, healthier, less polluted island, initiating the Eastern Cycle Network and backing free bus travel for children. I won my proposition for Jersey electricity charges to be reviewed and policies developed to encourage renewable energy initiatives. I campaigned on behalf of the deaf community and been a staunch supporter of Jersey's fishermen and our traditional industries. I fought for fairness and transparency for foreshore homeowners and successfully ensured our freedom of information rights extend to numerous state-controlled bodies. As Jersey's First Minister for International Development, I've reformed and professionalised our international aid programme, playing to the island's strengths in dairy, conservation and financial inclusion, co-opting local institutions like the RJHS and Durrell. I've also established overseas opportunities for local people with the UN. I think that as an island which was receiving overseas aid itself within living memory, We should be really proud of what it's now achieving for others. Meanwhile, as chair of the Jersey branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association in this special platinum year, I've nurtured Jersey's links with the Commonwealth family. Both positions require a wide-ranging skill set in order to deal with officers, high commissioners, ministers from overseas on behalf of the people of Jersey. I can do this, and I enjoy doing this. Recently, and in partnership with the Bailiff's Office, I've led the Island Identity Project, which seeks to enhance and promote the very core of Jersey. I've always been shocked at how relatively little our children, and indeed frontline staff, know of the island's constitution, history and political systems. So I've delivered practical learning resources which can also create a sense of belonging to our diverse communities and helps reshape the narrative about Jersey on the world stage, which will be even more crucial in these uncertain years to come as we reassess our relationship with the UK and Europe in a post-Brexit era. Whilst we live in a beautiful, successful island with almost full employment, the last few years have proved to be a very difficult time for us all. We have just experienced one of the biggest peacetime challenges in generations, where almost total focus was directed at managing and protecting the health of our community, whilst also supporting our economy, and no guidebook to show us the way. There continues to be a great deal that urgently needs doing, and getting the balance right between the economy, the environment and community is vital. Jersey is now faced with an ageing demographic and a shrinking workforce. Yet we need properly resourced public services, enough staff to satisfy business needs, and we need to ensure our children can afford homes in their island. There is no silver bullet. But rather than sit back and criticise, I prefer to look for solutions. I've identified some focus areas that need to be worked on in the next 4 years, which I hope you will read about in my manifesto. But to touch on a few, they include developing a self-sufficient economy by investing in a skilled workforce with apprenticeships, making us less reliant on outside support is key. Providing more focus and support for our traditional industries. Properly resourcing our health service to attract frontline medical staff with good working conditions. Health and well-being must be a cradle-to-grave experience. As we're all feeling the pinch with global cost of living rises, efforts must be made towards a more equal society, with our wealthiest incomers paying a fairer share. Our young people are leaving the island because it's too expensive, and like my boys discovered, there is a more vibrant life to be had in London in your 20s. But they might return home one day because Jersey is home. We need to provide decent-sized homes with amenity space cheaper. Establishing shared equity schemes and deposit loans to help them get onto the property ladder will help them see a future here. I want to see a long-term vision for our island developed, using the Island Identity Project as a solid foundation to start from. And finally, I will seek to have your voting rights reinstated. I've represented the largest single constituency since 2002 and taken the lead on numerous international and island-wide initiatives. I bring a proven track record and experience. In the parish, I've consistently fought against inappropriate development with great success, I might add. And I initiated and continue to be involved with various community-based initiatives, such as the Grouville Community Support Group, which helps parishioners in their day-to-day lives. I established the Grouville Gazette, which has been delivered free of charge to every household in Grouville for the last 18 years. My parish surgeries are essential to keep me in regular contact with you, my constituents. And I can't forget the Women's Force to be reckoned with, Le Grouville, which I established to mark the 100-year anniversary of women getting the vote in Jersey. And I pay tribute to the most fantastic bunch of volunteers in this parish who helped me deliver these services in our wonderful community. Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm re-elected, my pledge to you is a simple one: to listen, to continue to work hard for the whole community at parish, island and international levels. Thank you.
Philip Leclerc.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out on a drizzly, bleak evening. I'm a Jerseyman, born and raised, and after leaving school, I joined the army as a British soldier and became a bandsman and did lots of royal duties, which I'm very proud of, and the weekend was lovely to see. I then came back to Jersey and went into the construction industry and did a number of roles there before leaving to start Autism Jersey, a charity that supports people with autism. After some time working for Mind, the mental health charity, and the Shelter Trust, opening the new under-25 service at Strathmore as the project manager, I went back into construction, and I've done a few different senior management roles and director roles, and I'm currently the managing director of SGB Hire. I've got a long record of public service in Jersey. I'm currently the chair of the Board of Governors at Hope Valley School, very proud to lead that wonderful organisation, and I'm a Scout leader with almost 25 years of service, and I'm currently both the Diversity and Inclusion Advisor to the Scout Association and also their Safeguarding Advisor. I was the Vice Chair of the Jersey Construction Council and the Chair of its Education Subcommittee and the Chair of the Brick Foundation. I was the Chairman and a coach at the Archers of Jersey that shoot up the hill at Bullivo with my colleague Piers. And up until recently, I was the Vice Chair of the St Helier Youth and Community Trust, giving grants for community projects. I was instrumental in setting up the Inclusion Project, a youth service project for people with disabilities that currently delivers youth work to about 100 young people just now. And at the moment, I'm a member and a past chairman of the La Ronde concert band. So let's just give you an idea of some of the honorific things I've done in the past. I've been speaking to lots of parishioners, and one of the overwhelming messages that I've heard is that people are generally very unhappy with the larger constituencies and the loss of the island-wide mandate, the loss of the senatorial. And if elected, I and my party will vigorously pursue getting that turned back round. At least there should be a deputy for each parish, at least. Within the parish, I intend to work hard. Everybody says that, but I do. I really do. And anyone that knows me knows that I will give my all to whatever I do. I want to listen to you to find out what the main priorities are. But the things I'm hearing so far is that we need to establish ways of keeping our young people. I was talking to a parishioner on Saturday who tells me his 14-year-old son is already planning to go to university and not planning to come back. And that can't be allowed to happen. We cannot allow our bright young things to go off to university and not come back. It's a brain drain. We will then suffer from a lack of skills in the future, and it doesn't do us any good. So we need to find a way to keep them here. And of course, housing is the big challenge in that area. We need to ensure that there's a proper support system for first-time buyers. And as Carolyn mentioned, things like shared equity, deposit schemes, those kind of things. But we also need to make sure that we're protecting our green fields, that we're not just building randomly across Grouville to meet housing. It's got to be a balance. It's got to be a very, very sensitive balance. But, as was mentioned in the Hustings last week, there are plenty of green houses full of brambles that should be knocked down and turned into sensitively designed and appropriate housing for all people, not just first-time buyers. We need to look at road safety. People are concerned that there's some of the speeds that cars travel at through the parish, and we need to look at the green lanes and make sure that there's a proper network, a proper route. One of the benefits of COVID, if there are any benefits, was that people got out and got more active and discovered the country lanes. And our green lanes and our parish lanes in Grouville are the most beautiful in the island. Of course they are. we need to make sure that our community spaces are right. Another thing that was mentioned was the fact that parents are having to go through the tunnel for their children to play at playgrounds. That should never be allowed. We should never have to go through the tunnel. We don't want to. But talking to the Baton Club, it was encouraging to hear that there are plans to build our own terrain at the parish yard. And that's very exciting. And I'm keen to find out how we could support that through a mix of charity, corporate sponsorship, and other funding to make sure those kind of things happen. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, the eastern end of the tunnel, obviously, that's where the light belongs. And we need to make sure there's enough youth work. The Gorey Youth Club does a marvellous job, a wonderful job, but we need to make sure that is across the whole district. I know lots of people were surprised that I stood with Jersey Alliance, because you all know that I'm a bit of a lefty and a socialist, so you know, I'm not going to hide that fact. But it was interesting when I read their policies, I read their manifesto, I met their members, I realised that actually there's a cigarette paper between our thinking. Our thinking is basically we need to challenge inequity, and we need to make sure that everybody has a fair crack, that everybody has what's due to them, and that we look after those that are less able to look after themselves. My manifesto will come through your door this week. It was delayed for various reasons, not least of which was switching districts at the last minute. But I think when you read the manifesto and you see our policies, they're very much this. Everybody's going to say the same things. We're all going to talk about the crisis at the moment that's going through, costs with fuel and costs of everything going through the roof. We're all going to talk about that. We're all going to talk about the housing crisis. We're all going to talk about the future of our children. But we do need to have a plan. And the Alliance Party does have a plan. And most importantly, it's a costed plan. It's a plan that looks at the numbers, and we can afford to deliver, to make sure that we can that everybody gets what's due to them, that there's a fair crack of the whip. We know there's an urgent need to address the current States Assembly and the Government of Jersey. We know that. Unfortunately, I think it would be remiss of me not to say that it's suffered from difficulties in decision making. It's slow. That's because of the processes. They're cumbersome. They're unwieldy. And a civil service, well, we brought Mr Parker in to try and make things better. I don't think he did make things a lot better, if I'm honest, apart from for Mr Parker. And at least said soon as mended, probably. I think we need to make sure that the Isle of Jersey is run by people that passionately care about it, and that we engage properly again with the civil service, and that we provide leadership in the states, leadership in the civil service, and we make sure that we're all working together. That there's been too much bickering, backbiting and backstabbing as far as I can see. And I think what we need to do now is we need to all get together, regardless of whether you're in a party or an independent, whoever you stand with, and work together for the future of Jersey and for the now of Jersey. That's my honorific work gives me a lot of the skills that will be needed to help address some of those needs. And if you vote for me, I'm going to say it, we're all going to say it, I will work tirelessly, but I will. You also know that I'm not frightened to challenge. You also know, if you remember from recent weeks, when I gave back the Putting Children First poster, I'm not frightened to stand up for those that are less able to stand up for themselves. So I will challenge, and I will ensure that Grouville is put first with St Martin. I have to say that, don't I? Tomorrow, on Friday, I'll be saying put St Martin first with Grouville, obviously. But it is one big district. What can I want people to work together? My track record is bringing teams together, working positively to affect change in a good way, and not just to complain. Then please vote for me, and I will repay it with my dedication, hard work, and absolute commitment to you, the electorate of Grouville. Thank you.
Steve Luce.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As the Constable said, my name's Steve Luce. I'm a 63-year-old Jerseyman, and I've been Deputy of St Martin since 2011. I was born in maternity hospital, obviously, but I've lived in St Clement's for the first 29 years of my life, educated at St Clement's School, College, and then at the Royal Agricultural College in Cirencester. I didn't finish my course. I'd by that time decided that I wanted to farm in Jersey, and that being educated in farming in the UK wasn't quite the same thing. And I returned to the island and started a career in agriculture. I didn't have a family farm to go to. And I worked in management for 8 years before being very fortunate, extremely fortunate, to take on the tenancy of the farm around Roselle Manor, and I moved into St Martin. Over the years, I've had a dairy herd, obviously producing milk. I grew potatoes, vegetables, flowers. And in the mid-90s, I got together with a very good friend of mine, Chris Lemosrier, and took over the Jersey Oyster Company, which we ran very successfully for some time, and also including the purchase of Happy Hens during that time. But in 2011, I stood back from my commercial activity and became a politician for my sins. And I've been the deputy of St Martin since that time. But during those years, I've also enjoyed very much my presidency of the Young Farmers Club, chairmanship of the Countrymen's Club. I've been a member of the advisory panel at the Philip Munnell Training Centre. I've done 2 sessions on the youth panel, 2 sessions on the Jersey Police Complaints Authority. I've served on the Executive Committee of the Chamber of Commerce and on the councils of both the RJA and the Farmers Union. I'm probably the least musical member of my family, but still for my, I play the organ at the local Methodist Church, and I'm on board there as well. And as soon as I moved into St Martin and became my own boss, I joined the lifeboat crew at St Catherine's, and I'm very proud to have served both on the boat and now still in an honorary capacity on the shore. I've been a member of the States now for over 10 years. I've served as chairman of scrutiny panels, vice chairman. I've served on the legislation advisory panel, the planning committee. I was Minister for the Environment for 3.5 years. I've taken propositions to get really much needed housing at Ann Court. I've won Women's Refuge, and during my time as Minister, I formed the Cleaner Water Group, which got farmers together working with the department and with Jersey Water to find ways to make sure that the water that goes into our reservoirs is as good as it possibly can be. I also took the unilateral decision as Minister to increase the size of the no-fish zone around the Equihoes, very much against some of the wishes of fishermen from Carteret. Reinvigorating the economy, addressing population growth, protecting the environment, finding some housing solutions, delivering better health care and education. And I'll just stress, the first one is confidence in government. We've had, as has already been mentioned, a one-gov system for the last few years that was supposed to have by now be delivering savings and real benefits. And if anything, it's done completely the opposite. We're now spending over £200 million a year more than we were 3.5 years ago, and we're employing over 800 staff more than we had at the beginning of this last term of government. We need to reinvigorate the economy, and I just said that, but we need to get better at using artificial intelligence and technology. As governments go, we're way down the list of things that we use intelligence for. We have to address population growth, and there isn't an easy answer. The only answer is the least worst one, and my party policy is that we need to continue to grow the population, but only just as little as we possibly can while we maintain the economy. Obviously, as an ex-farmer, I want to continue to protect the environment. Farmers have done a great job recently in reducing the amount of fertiliser and chemicals they put on the land, but we need to work with them. We need to help them because they're facing real challenges at the moment. There are housing solutions out there, but only by sharing the equity and making sure we can build cheaper are we going to be able to keep our young people here. The cost of housing is astronomical at the moment, and it's not been helped by the great demand led by buy-to-let. The cost of going to the doctor is something that has to be addressed. The assistance given by government hasn't changed since 2012, and we need to address that so people can afford to go to the doctor. It's absolutely wrong that people don't seek health care because they can't afford it. And finally, education. Every child on this island needs to be helped to produce their absolute best, whatever that is. And teachers at the moment are not teaching enough. They're spending far too much time having to do admin. So we need to find ways of looking at the curriculum and addressing that. When I started as Deputy of St Martin's in 2011, I said my priorities were to deliver some affordable housing, retirement homes, relocate the school and use the old school building to the best of our ability. And working with others, I've been a key part, I'd like to think, of a team that had delivered all those things. We now have the most fantastic school at St Martin. The old school building delivers facilities for all the community, whether that's a doctor or a vet or a pharmacy or a small supermarket. We have the most fantastic village green, which is going to get only better. And most recently in the Island Plan debate, I took a proposition to rezone another field, unfortunately, but very much needed field for retirement homes. We have a very long list of elderly parishioners in St Martin's who need somewhere to retire to, and I'm very fortunate to have won that debate. I will continue, if re-elected, to work tirelessly as much as I can for the community facilities in both parishes. I'm a great believer in the need for additional affordable homes, additional retirement homes, so that everybody in the parishes, whether they're young or old, can feel they can stay in the parishes that they love and where they live. I very much hope you would consider me for one of your votes on the 22nd. Thank you.
Piers, Songo.
Right, well, I'm the last, so we can wake up soon to get to the questions. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I believe the last time I was actually up on the stage, I was holding the boo and hiss cards for the parish pantomime. Hopefully they will not be needed tonight. These hustings are a great opportunity for you as the electorate to ask the questions that matter to you and a chance to get to know your candidates a bit better. As such, I will keep this intro brief to maximise our time for questions this evening. I'm a born and bred Jersey bean and grew up here in the parish. I'm a husband and father of 2 daughters, one in primary and the other just about to start nursery. I have a BSc in Conservation Biology and an MSc in Island Biodiversity and Conservation. In 2012, I started my ecological consultancy, Songo Island Conservation, which has now proudly been serving the island for 10 years. As part of the company's portfolio, I have worked alongside many sectors, including development, conservation, government, agriculture, and of course, managing Grouville Marsh SSI. One of the most recent things I've also been involved in is I've joined the Linking Environment and Farming Technical Advisory Committee, which develops environmental farming standards for the international mark. Part of the key work I've been involved in is not just about protecting our island's wildlife, but being able to find the middle ground to achieve the goals of all parties involved. I have several key focuses, which are detailed in my manifesto, so I will not go into them here. These are all areas where I've had experience, either directly or from my family. Jersey is a phenomenal place to live, work, and raise a family, and it is because of this I've decided to stand for election, to bring my experience to the Assembly with a new and fresh approach. We have many challenges ahead, some we know about, others that have yet to appear, and I will endeavour to use my skills and experience to navigate the challenges ahead for our environment, our island, and our future. I will leave it there to ensure we have plenty of time for questions, and please do not hesitate to contact me if you have any further queries after this evening.
I'm now going to open the meeting up to questions. Drew Livingston's got the microphone. You will have to use it because the meeting is being live streamed both to the church and more widely. Before the meeting, we decided that the candidates would take it in turns to be the first to answer each question. So the first question will be answered first by Guy to Faye, and then I'll work down the line. So are there any questions? Somebody here in the middle row?
Hello, I live in Grouville, and as many of you identified, we are absolutely great on identifying problems. I would like to know about solutions. And one of the biggest one is obviously the rising cost of living. What is your solution in local level for that? Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you, the solution to what?
The rise in cost of living?
The rise in the cost of living. Yeah. Well, of course, the novelty element in Jersey is that we have quite a few people in this island who probably won't notice the rises in the cost of living because they are well heeled, to use an old phrase. I think we need to concentrate on two areas. One is who we normally describe as the less well off. I'll come to that. And the other are pensioners, because when you're in fixed incomes, dealing with increasing cost of living becomes progressively more difficult. So I think we're going to have to look very early on at increasing the size of pensions for those who have limited pensions. Now, as for those who are less well off amongst us, I think that we could look at raising the threshold of income tax. Those of you with a long memory may remember that when GST was introduced, the threshold was raised by £4,000 to compensate people at their end of the earning spectrum from the impact it would have on basically daily shopping. I think we need to do something similar again. And I'll conclude on this because I feel really quite strongly about it. We need to stop the scandal of Andium, which is the new trendy name for what used to be called States Housing, charging its tenants the equivalent of market rental. All these properties are owned by the public of the island, and except in exceptional circumstances,
Sorry, Guy, that's your
sale.
2 minutes.
Oh, thank you for the question. Obviously, you identified in the question that this is a global issue. So what Jersey, and you're absolutely right, it is a global issue. We've got the pandemic recovery to pay for, the Ukraine crisis, and an issue with supply chains. So the cost of living has gone up, I think it's 9% in the last year, which is enormous. But what we can only realistically do in Jersey is mitigate against this, because it is a global issue. As Guy said, and you'll find this in my manifesto, I think we could raise tax thresholds. So that would be a fair, equal way of addressing, especially those on lower incomes. I would take GST off local foods for local markets, which would also help the farmers, and it would hopefully get them to supply our markets more than just exporting. I would also favour triple or even double locking the pension so that it keeps pace with the cost of living. And to pay for all of this, initially, I would, as I alluded to in my opening remarks, ask the wealthy newcomers to pay a fairer share initially. Now, if cost of living is going to continue to rise at this rate, then we might have to look at our tax system across the board, because there's no way that we can. This is something that we've got to keep an eye on, and it's concerning the whole population. Thank you.
I think specifically we need to target help where it's needed, and the direct payment scheme that was brought in recently, I can't remember the figure, one of my sitting members I'm sure would be able to help me, was given to people on income support and those below income support that qualified for the payment. That needs to be reviewed urgently to make sure that it's enough, and income support needs to be reviewed so that those less well-off people, those low-income families, have sufficient to live on. There is absolutely in our manifesto a pledge to review the amount of tax that wealthy incoming people pay, because it needs to be appropriate, and they need to support the island that they're coming to live in. Taking GST off food, I'm afraid I'm not totally for, because the reality is those that spend the most on it will benefit the most, and that's not the people that need the help. Taking 5% off somebody's food bill is a very small amount. It's much better to target that by increasing their income support to appropriate levels to make sure that they're supported. Pensions do need to be looked at. They haven't gone up, they haven't risen appropriately, and they are low compared to Europe. And we need to make sure that the pensioners are not suffering unduly because of low levels of pension.
Thank you. Steve Luce.
It's difficult to disagree with things that have come before you, especially when you get towards the end of the list, but certainly in the manifesto that I promote, we say that community costs benefit will have to rise. There's no doubt that as people were writing their manifestos and coming up with thoughts for this election, that the cost of living issues are starting to materialise. And I think we can all see that they are going to continue to get worse as this terrible war in Ukraine starts to continue its way through the autumn and the grain crops do not get exported. We're going to see continued rises in the cost of living, and Brexit and the pandemic has all come at once, and it's making life extremely difficult. And the people we have to help the most are those that have the least. And that means, as I've already said, community costs benefit will have to rise. The way we support those on income support will have to rise. All community supports will have to rise, as will the level of old age pension for those who don't have enough to survive, because it's going to get really difficult. We can't get away from the fact that food is going to get increasingly expensive. After the First World War, my parents spent a third of their income on food to feed my family, and I think we're going to have to accept that we've had it very good for a very long period of time, and we're going to have to pay a little bit more for some of those things which we regarded as just essentials. Something else I'd like to just mention is that we do have children at the moment who go to school very hungry, don't get very much food during the course of their day, and we need to also really look at that very, very hard to make sure that every child on this island is being fed properly during this time when food gets more and more expensive. That may well be meaning that government will have to dip into their pocket and make sure that children at school are fed properly.
Thank you. Piers Songo.
As Steve said, being the last at the end of the row, most things have already been said. The only thing I will add, as well as we need to be considerate of those on income support, is there are a lot of the middle earners which are just on the threshold above not gaining any support, which this is going to be hitting very, very hard. And we need to also make sure that they are not ignored and forgotten about when support is going out. So, as everyone has said, there's no end to this at the moment. There's no, it's going to drop off. We need to look forward to the future, but we need to make sure that we take care of the whole island. And that includes everyone from low income to middle income as well, that they will need support moving forward.
Thank you. Rose Binney.
Well, I think most things have already been said. There's definitely a problem with cost of living. It's only going to get worse.
Oh, yes, sorry, your microphone.
Sorry. Yes, I think most things have already been covered, but I agree there's definitely a problem with the cost of living, and it's only going to get worse. And we do have to look at raising basic pensions and helping those on income support. And I agree with Guy when he's talking about the cost of rents in Andium homes. I think that definitely needs looking at to help people there.
Thank you. Is there another question? I did see somebody at the back on the left there. Drew was the next person I saw.
The candidates give us their opinion on the assisted dying legislation.
I didn't catch the first bit.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Following the excellent work of the citizens' jury, could the panel please give us their opinion on the assisted dying legislation?
First to answer this question will be Carolyn Labbe.
Thank you for the question. It's obviously a very difficult question because it's a very emotive one. we had this debate in the States, and it was incredibly difficult. But I ended up voting with assisted dying because subject to, and it will be subject to, the health minister coming forward with appropriate safeguards. Obviously, the vulnerable have got to be protected. So whilst he got the green light to go away and come forward with legislation, we need to scrutinise the legislation to make entirely sure that the vulnerable are protected.
Thank you. Philip Leclerc.
It's a very tough question, Steve. I have to declare an interest that I'm a Roman Catholic, and as such, my faith gives me a very clear steer. That being said, as an elected official, you have to put that aside sometimes and look at the bigger issue. I would find it very difficult to vote in that election, and I think it's very important that the legislation, when it's written, is properly debated and scrutinised to ensure that those safeguards are there. It's absolutely vital that nobody that it isn't. There are no loopholes. There can be no little get-out clauses. It has to be absolutely beyond watertight. So I think the excellent work that the citizens' jury did in bringing all the stuff together, it's now the job of the health minister and his officers to put forward a set of recommendations for the states to debate that will enable them to make an informed, proper decision. That it's not going to mean that somebody loses their life unintentionally or unnecessarily, but that we respect the rights of people who want to end their own life. But it is a minefield of a question. But thank you for asking for it, Steve.
Thank you. Steve Luce.
Yes, it's not very long ago that Carolyn said we had the states debate, a really, really difficult debate. And I must say straight away that this is not an issue that the Progress Party, have a view on. It's a moral issue, but for every individual to make their own mind up as they vote individually on this. But I was very clear that I think it's absolutely wrong that islanders in excruciating pain with no way out and no sign of a cure are travelling off island to Switzerland in order to end their lives, because there really is no way forward for them. And I was happy to move to the next stage so that the states go away and look further at this issue. There's absolutely no doubt there will be more consultation, more review, absolutely no doubt there will be safeguards in place all over the place. But I think when you're faced excruciating pain with no chance, no possibility, even the smallest possibility of a way out, that is something that we must look at.
Thank you. And Steve, I can ask you next time, just remain seated. It's better for the microphones. I saw some people straining to hear a little bit, so quite happy for everybody just to remain seated. Piers.
My view on it is it's not my decision whether somebody wants to stay or choose to end their life. And as such, I've got no issue in supporting the propositions as it's brought forward. But as others have said, it will depend on the safeguards. We need to make sure that no one is taken advantage of and that the vulnerable are properly protected. But I believe it's everyone's right to choose how they finish their life.
Thank you. Rose?
I fully support assisted dying. I don't think it's correct that people who are at the end of their life in agonising pain, it's difficult enough without having to face up to perhaps getting on a plane and going to Switzerland. I think that there will be enough safeguards in place. I do hope that sort of all this talk of safeguarding and extra looking at everything won't elongate the process, because I think it seems to be has got the possibility of going on longer than it needs to, and I think people definitely need that backup possibility to have assisted dying, even if people don't want to use it. At the end, that they have got that option. I do really think it's the right thing for people. If anyone who's witnessed anyone who is at the end of their life dying in excruciating pain, I think most of us would agree with it.
Thank you. Guy de Faye.
In a sense, we have assisted dying already. It's called palliative care, and you get progressively increasing amount of drugs to ease pain, and slowly, essentially, you slip away. It seems to me, though, the key element of assisted dying is that people have made a personal decision that they don't want palliative care. They would rather have a point in time that they have a level of control over, because they don't want to face either going into progressive unconsciousness or worse pain than they're enduring already. These are people who know when they wish to die, and they should be allowed to take that decision. That may not agree with some of your religious sensibilities, I understand that, but we live in a secular world, and legislators have to deal with things on a secular basis. I think if you know when you're going to die, if you know when you want to die, you should be allowed to die.
Thank you. I saw Dominic Jones on the right-hand side by the door next.
Good evening. We're sitting here very close to the French coast, a jurisdiction which historically we've had both strong trade and cultural links, and indeed all the members sitting there, the candidates tonight, have Norman or French surnames. I feel very strongly that over the last few years we've focused too much on political and trade links with the UK to the detriment of our links with France. I'd like to know whether the candidates agree, and if so, what they would do about that.
Thank you. First to answer the question this time is you, Philip.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. That my childhood growing up in Jersey was you know, the logo was closer to France, but we're not. It feels like it's further away. There is poor links to France for day trippers, or you know. And when I came back from the army in 1986, I drove a hire car van for Falls Hire Cars, and we used to pick up hundreds of tourists from the pier at Gorey every single day and ferry them backwards and forwards to Longville. That's all gone. I think we absolutely need to redress that imbalance. The Alliance Française, we need to be working with those guys and trying to foster some positive links. But I think most of the first step would be to get those transport links in place, find a way of bringing the French people over and letting us go to France for the day, for the weekend. You know, it's something we used to do as we just jump on the boat and go down. We'd go down to Gorey and jump on the next one. It was like a bus service. That's all gone. You're absolutely right. And I think we've lost a little bit of our uniqueness in the British Isles, if you can call us part of the British Isles. Probably more part of the British Isles now than we were 20 years ago. So I think, yeah, the transport and trade links need to be addressed urgently. It's a really good point, Dominic. Thank you.
Steve Luce.
Yes, thanks, Dominic. My family may have been here for a few hundreds of years, but my family name comes from Normandy, and when I go over there, not as often as I'd like, I certainly feel a very great affinity to that part of the country. I worked for many years delivering oysters in France and built up many friendships, and it was always my fervent wish that we, like you said, trade much closer to our near neighbours than our far neighbours. It's been incredibly difficult to try to get those trade links to work. Many people in France, if you ask them to supply you with goods, will say they have to go via the UK and be redelivered back down to the Channel Islands. It seems a nonsense that we can't just cross those 14, 16, 20 miles of water. Certainly I'm proud to have done my bit to try to get more trade links with our French neighbours, and I find it very disappointing that we haven't come out better from Brexit. Certainly some of the ease that we were moving in and out of France has gone, and it's going to be very, very difficult to get back again. Certainly from an oyster and shellfish point of view, a border inspection post in Grouville would be a great help, but we're using Brittany and going to St Malo. I'd do anything I could to get this link back on a more even keel. It's disappointing to, as I was a couple of weeks ago, speak to people working for us in France who say they now have to speak to London in order to speak to Jersey. They can't pick the phone up and speak direct from Caen to the Jersey office because there's nobody there to listen to them. I find that incredible. And more recently, we had an invite issued from a London office to a meeting with some French people who were here. Again, very disappointing. We've got to get back to a way of dealing directly with our French neighbours, whether that's on trade, whether that's on fishing, whether that's on anything at all. We can no longer just drive into Carteret, enjoy lunch and come back. We now need to meet customs officials, book that meeting.
Thank you. Piers, Songo.
Thank you for the question, Dominic. Yeah, I fully agree that we should have much better trade links, commuting links to France, our nearest neighbours. Our wildlife has no problem. It zips backwards and forwards, but we are limited now. I also think it may be an option that we can look at for actually reducing cost of materials coming into the island. If we're missing out on several extra trade movements, that's going to cost down the overall cost of actually moving materials around about, and that could actually help in the cost of housing, cost of living. So I think it's really important that we do try to navigate the Brexit waters to try and actually get some trade links back up, because it just makes sense for our island. At the moment, we're kind of beholden to the UK, very colonial in some aspects, and we just need our independence for actually sorting out these trade routes.
Thank you. Rose Binney.
Yes, I dislike the way that this island has become governed by London. That's how I feel it's become very, very anglicised. And if possible, I would like to explore if we could have a relationship similar to Northern Ireland. They seem to be able to deal with the UK and with Europe very freely. And if it seems to work for them, I can't see why it can't work for us. I think I'm very unhappy that we left the single market and the customs union. I think it's highly damaging for everyone, and I think it's now actually coming out what a bad idea it was on every level. And it would bring the cost of living down as well, of course, because what's happening at the moment, if we go into a trade war with the European Union, the pound's going to slump and costs are going to rise even more. So I think, that's how I would look to see what we can do as Jersey, or the Channel Islands even better.
Thank you. Guy de Faye.
Well, I'm afraid my family come from a rather ancient province a little further south than Normandy and Brittany was called Poitou. And I'm an enormous fan of encouraging good relations between ourselves and our neighbours on the continent. Unfortunately, we're about to hit a really tricky phase of negotiations with our French counterparts over fishing. And that's going to be a real dog's breakfast compared to just issuing licenses, because we're going to move into how licenses will be conditioned, where you can fish, what you can fish for, and how much can you have. So this is going to be a little traumatic for a year or two. Having said that, I think there are enormous advantages to having far better links with the French. Apart from anything else, think of the money. When sterling is strong, we can go there and everything will seem cheap as chips. And when the euro is strong against sterling, they'll all come over here and enjoy our restaurants, buying their gabardines they used to describe raincoats as. And I think there's a huge element of get this right for the future, and it's of benefit to both parties.
Thank you. Carolyn Labbe.
Thank you, Dominic. I entirely agree. It's the obvious answer to improve our relations and certainly set up some trade routes with France. Here we are, 14 miles away. It's ludicrous to me, and it's ludicrous to me how we have to go post-Brexit, Jersey, Whitehall, Brussels, Paris, Normandy and Brittany. It's a nonsense. And to prove just what a nonsense it is, and that there are more than one way to skin a cat, we had our French cousins over. We're twins with Piers in Grouville. I'm losing track of days now. Saturday, when we were on the common, and one of the members of our Piers twinning group became the agricultural minister in France. He's a close friend of Macron, and I just see, well, why can't we do something that way? So, yes, very, very, very much. I know that there are protocols we have to go to, and we can't, we have to toe a line of such. However, as far as the fishing goes and trade links, I think we ought to be looking to ourselves, and that's one of the reasons why the Island Identity project, I feel, is quite important. We've got to start carving out our own identity, our own international profile, and be out there. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, I did see somebody at the back, I think, yes, there.
Thank you, members. Chris Lemazre, also Jersey Oyster Company. The question sort of mimics very much Dominic's question, but our rural parishes of Grouville and St Martin play host to many generations of farmers and fishermen. These hard-working parishioners provide the meat, veg and seafood we enjoy and rely on. Jersey is not self-sufficient, and food security is very important. If Jersey has the best soil, best cows, best fishing grounds, why are we losing so many people in these sectors? There are no young people coming into these sectors. The reasons are quite simple. As I see it, it's down to a lot of government.
Chris, can I ask you to just ask a question rather than give your own opinions, because it's really the candidates' opinions that people are interested in.
Yeah, government decisions, the rezoning for land, employment and Brexit. I feel Jersey's been weak and in its acceptance stance of Brexit as opposed to a negotiating stance. How would the members look at regaining Jersey's independence, not necessarily completely independent, but protect our agricultural land and the farmers and fishermen who maintain them?
Steve Luce this time.
Wow, that could have been a kinder question. It was when we woke up the morning after Brexit, I think a lot of us thought, oh my goodness, because we knew that it was going to be difficult for Jersey. We knew that we hadn't had a vote, that the decision to leave the European Union was one that we hadn't taken part in, but it was one that we were going to have to, in our case, we were going to have to suffer, and it certainly proved the case with fishing, and I accept that particularly in your industry, Chris, that it's been tough. It's in some ways been easier that you work in France a lot, so you've been able to negotiate, you've been able to talk to people yourself, and you've been able to keep trade links open, which has been good for wet fishermen and the lobster and the crab boys. But the issue of independence is one that I'm not an expert on particularly, but I think we need to realise that if we decided to go independent, it would make life extremely good in some ways, but extremely difficult and extremely expensive in others. And what we've had to do is to tread this very delicate and difficult path with our neighbours from France as to how we move forward. And somebody's already said, I think it was Guy, that the next phase of negotiation with the French over fishing is going to be challenging, and it will be, because it's one thing to give somebody a licence, but then dictate the nature and the extent of what they can do with that licence is going to be really difficult. So we do continue to face challenges, and it's like I said, the last answer, we've got to talk directly to the French. As far as I'm concerned, that is the way to do things. It's really difficult talking through London and then through Brussels back to Paris and then back to Normandy. It's quite ridiculous. We're not so badly affected in the agricultural sector because our exports go north, but it is the marine and the aquaculture industries that are going to struggle the most. And it's clear in my belief that governments just need to talk to directly, and rather than go around the houses, we need to talk directly to our French counterparts.
Thank you. Piers, Songo.
As many of you know, I do work very closely with the agricultural sector, and even as an environmentalist, I see the huge benefit that the agriculture sector bring, particularly on the terrestrial side. They actually help maintain around 56% of the island as wonderful open green space, and particularly within Grouville and St Martin. They make our rural parishes so unique. Both sectors, the agriculture and the aquaculture, have suffered from underinvestment from our government for years on end. Just this year, they finally managed to up the investment into the sector to about 4 million. Yet I got told the other day that the Isle of Man, whose agriculture sector has a smaller margin, gets around 11 million, because they also invest in the extra benefit that those sectors can bring. So it is not just about the product they bring out the ground, but all the other benefits that they bring to the island. And for us, that is also protecting the open land space, helping protect the wonderful biodiversity, the one on ground and below the waterline. So I think it's imperative that we're able to keep the agriculture and aquaculture sectors going, and also help them to diversify into the future. And there are fantastic opportunities for young people to potentially join in if there is the right investment there. Where the sector is going, the technology that's involved, it's a new generation of people that need to come in. There was a fantastic article from the Suffolk showground of new solar-powered tractors, which are doing the seeding and the hoeing. And that is not your traditional farming, it's a different mindset. And I think Jersey can be a fantastic test bed, a little experiment on what can work. And we should move on that whilst we can before other people pick up that market.
Thank you. Rose Binney.
Me again. Coming back to the links with France question, yes, I definitely think we should be talking directly with the French. And as I said before, whether we can pursue a Northern Ireland style of agreement, so that we can have much easier transport of goods both ways. That's my opinion. As far as farming is concerned, I think it's very difficult to know what to do there, because it's very expensive to support smaller farmers, and you'd have to be looking at exactly what you wanted to achieve when you're doing it, because if you're looking to sort of have small farmers that do sort of niche crops, that's one thing. But if you're looking at sort of doing mainstream crops, it's much more expensive to produce them in Jersey. It's difficult because we have to bring in labour, and that's becoming increasingly difficult to find a supply of labour. And it's when you're working in big fields on the mainland, it's so much easier to get cheaper crops, and your machinery is more efficient. Working in small fields over here does make it a very challenging alternative to importing our food. Sorry.
Thank you. Guy de Faye.
I remember when the financial services industry turned up in this island, and a lot of my intellectually challenged school chums started becoming bank managers, much to my astonishment. And if you remember, since that time, we've always been concerned about relying on that particular industry. And we've always talked about diversifying. And all sorts of things have been thrown up for diversification, none of them particularly successful. And I suggest simply that right now, we should diversify. And Government of Jersey should finally take seriously our two most traditional industries, which are farming and fishing. They're not just 100 years old, they're thousands of years old. That's what's been going on here for time immemorial, and we're letting them go. Ever since we joined up with the European Economic Community, hands up, I did vote for it, the Common Agricultural Policy kicked in, and farmers were assured by government at the time that don't worry, we'll compensate you, we'll make sure you don't lose out to France, the EU, or anything else. I have never seen appropriate compensation awarded to our farming community, and I think our fishing community are treated worse. It is really time we got our act together, thought about this seriously. These are two potentially fantastic, productive local industries. Do you know what? In Padstow, they have a lobster and crab hatchery. It's been there for 20 years. Why on earth don't we have something similar?
Thank you. Carolyn Labbe.
Thank you, Chris. Food security is an issue, and it's going to be an even bigger issue as the Ukraine continues. I'm probably a bit sceptical about all these fields going for cannabis use when we might very well need them for food in the future. So I think we've got to sort of watch that space very, very carefully. On my time on economic development, when I was assistant minister, I had the fisheries portfolio, and Jersey, I don't feel, gives our fishermen and our fishing fleet enough assistance, enough support. And I was the first assistant minister to have got them support during a very rough winter in 2014. And when they tell me now that they're competing with the French, and the French are getting a whole raft of subsidies from the EU, and they're paid for their licenses, etc., etc. It's that they're not competing on a level playing field. So I feel that we've got to look after our fisheries, look after our fishermen and traditional industries. With regard to fisheries as well, I think probably we need to revisit the Bay of Grouville treaty. That got put in the bin when Brexit happened. So I feel that we could go, instead of, as I said in the past question, instead of via Whitehall, Paris, Brussels, Paris, and the rest, we should be negotiating directly with...
Philip Leclerc.
Thank you, Chris. I'm not sure how many other people were surprised at COVID when lockdown came in, when we found out just how little wet fish and shellfish is sold locally, and most of it is exported. And I think there was a big shock for a lot of us, and we started buying our fish down at the quay or wherever the vans were to try and help the local fishermen. I think the government needs to get behind that and make sure that there's proper support. I'm not sure that the subsidies that are given to farmers are enough. When I worked for Back to Work, we tried to get young people and unemployed people, long-term unemployed people, to work on farms and in fisheries. But sadly, it's just too much like hard work, too many hours and not enough money. So you're not going to attract people unless they passionately want to do it. They've got to almost have it in their blood. But I think if we can get the support from the states right in the way of subsidies, and we can make sure that those trade agreements are in place, then we can build it back up. We saw a slight turnaround, Chris. I'm sure I hope you won't correct me, but when we started buying locally because of COVID, it helped a lot of fishermen. I know others suffered, but a lot of the guys on the quay were saying, "Thank goodness you're here buying your fish on a Friday. Otherwise, we'd be selling our boats." So I think we've got to get behind it as a community. And again, I'm back to Jersey coming together and working together to resolve these problems. It's not about one party, one person. It's about us all working together to get over the difficulties.
Thank you. Another question, Drew. I saw the gentleman in the middle, 2 rows behind you with the beard.
There's been some challenges with recruiting, training and retaining staff in health and community services. Could you give us your views on how you might address that?
That's to you first, Piers.
I've got a lot of concerns about this, actually, because particularly in the healthcare sector, a lot of the funding is based on the long-term care. And this, in essence, is causing wage capping, because there is only so much money going out, and therefore there is only so much of a wage that can be offered. And particularly when you've got staff and you would like them to be a carer, for example, and they're being offered about £10.20 an hour, but they've got to have their level 3 qualifications, got to have their DBS checks, or they can go, and I believe there was a gardening firm open, wanted someone for no qualifications for £16 something an hour. Which one are you going to? The problem that we've got at the moment with the care sector across its entirety is it's now no longer a viable career that you can have and raise a family on, which is exceptionally concerning. Because we've put so much reliance on long-term healthcare funding coming out of the government, but it's been limited, those wages have not been able to increase. And I'm quite concerned with the new proposed care model of throwing it out onto the voluntary sector, which again are going to have the same attitudes. And when I've talked to people before, and they said people go into care because it's vocational, they enjoy doing it, that's not going to help all of us when we actually need the care, because it's going to be understaffed, and we need to get the professional people and the workforce there to actually look after the island for the future.
Thank you. Rose Binney?
Well, basically, it's money, and we have to pay the staff that we need properly. We have to house them properly, and we have to encourage them to stay in the island and not keep. There's a big turnover of staff at the moment. Obviously, people come here and they find it's too expensive, and they're not getting paid enough, and then they leave again. So we've got this big churn. What we want is people that actually want to come here, stay here, and work here in their particular sections. But we have got a big problem. I know we sort of talk about an immigration problem, but I think I see a lot of people, I know personally people that are in the healthcare sector leaving, and I think it's going to get worse unless we do something drastic to put it right.
Guy de Faye?
I'm very sorry to have to say this, but the health department, and to some extent community services, is probably the most dysfunctional department in our entire government. It's just a mess. I have had first-hand experience because my mother hasn't been very well for 4 years. I was on the first Council of Ministers when we gave the health department £12.5 million for IT. I was no longer in the States, and about 4 or 5 years later they came back again and said they wanted another £12.5 million. Well, right, you've got £25 million of information technology. How was it that the consultants on 2 issues my mother faced didn't know what the other consultants were prescribing for pills? How did that happen? Now, I'm told that for the new hospital, they want a completely new round of IT equipment. So I would suggest that's a £25 million bill minimum coming down the way. Now, I've also come across plenty of really genuine people who just said, I'm sorry, this is my last visit. Oh, what's the problem? Well, I'm spending almost all my money on my rent, and I'm just having a bad time living in Jersey. That can't be right. It was not correct that we failed to buy the Stafford Hotel next to the General Hospital when it was up for sale. We should have snapped up the Riviera. These are the places that have potential to put health workers into at reasonable cost rentals. Why were those options never taken up? The whole thing needs an absolute turnaround across the board.
Thank you, Guy. Carolyn?
I would agree that health and social services is the one department that needs focus on, and the management structure, and we need to get more staff in on the front line and less managers. So that's the first point. There are some courses going on at the moment that have been set up in the last couple of years to train nurses locally There's some courses with Chester University, and there's some social worker training and mental health training on island, which is good news. There is a general shortage of doctors throughout the UK, and certainly I know those in private practice in Jersey, there's 12 vacancies at the moment, with 13 retiring soon. So we have a shortage, or are certainly going to have a shortage of doctors in the island. So we have to urgently address this, and we will be able to address it with better accommodation and, dare I say it, better working conditions. I know one chap who's locally educated, currently works in Canada as a neurosurgeon, came over here last summer to work in our hospital. And he, with a view to maybe staying, and he said there's no way he's going to continue working here. It's Victorian. So I think the conditions that our staff are working in as well.
Thank you. Philip Leclerc.
I come from a business world where if I need top people, I pay them top dollar. It's as simple as that. And I pay them the appropriate rate to get the best people for the job that I need doing. I was talking to a parishioner the other day who works in, I won't say which department, but he's worked in that department for 8 years now, and he's on his 6th different director. 6 different directors in 8 years. How on earth can you create a culture and have leadership when you've got a turnover of senior management at that level? There are far too many at the top, not enough at the bottom. We need to address that. But it's not just health and social services. Education is the same. We're losing good teachers because we make an offer on a Monday and they're offered 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 more to go and work in Wales the following day. Young social workers, I was talking to 2 the other day that are currently on the course at the moment to qualify as local social workers. They've both got their eyes set on the UK when they're qualified, because they're going to get their training here and then they're off because they can't afford to live here. So we're back to affordable housing and making sure that we're supporting people and giving people the appropriate amounts of pay. 20 years ago, nurses would come, they were earning 15, 20% more than in the UK and paying more rent, but they didn't mind because it came out in the wash. Now they can earn more money staying in the north of England, so why come to Jersey? But we've got to address that, otherwise we're just going to keep losing frontline workers and gaining more and more UK consultants and more senior managers in hospitals that actually should get out of the way and spend the money differently, spend the money better.
Thank you. Steve Luce.
Thanks for the question. When I was a minister back in 2015, we learnt that between 2015 and 2035, the number of retired people on this island was going to go from 16,000 to 32,000. That's a doubling in 20 years. We knew we were going to need more retirement homes, more nursing homes, more sheltered accommodation. Despite my best efforts, I wasn't successful. The previous government that we've just come out of has missed the opportunity in the draft Bridging Island plan to try to get more nursing, more retirement homes, more sheltered accommodation for these people who need to be looked after. And some of us, I include myself in that, will need looking after. Key worker accommodation is one of the keys to getting this right. We need to incentivise people to come here from the UK. We need to give them good, top quality accommodation that they can afford to live in. And Philip's quite right, I wrote down here, pay more. I'm afraid we have to pay those people who are going to look after us more money, entice them to this island, keep them in the island, and to provide good levels of pay for those local people who want to work in the industry as well. We cannot afford to neglect the care that we must give to a population which is increasingly getting older. There's going to be lots of people like me, unfortunately, in this island in the near future, and some of us are going to need a lot of care.
Thank you. I saw Bruce Willing next.
To continue on the theme of accommodation, due to a lack of short-term accommodation, there is a clear pressure on the recruitment of workers for tourism, agriculture and health, particularly now with the news that there are to be 500 rising to 900 workers on the new hospital site. If elected, what would candidates propose to do to get Jersey over this temporary situation, bearing in mind that today we have fewer than 7,000 tourist beds?
That question to Rose Binney first, please.
To be honest, it's a very difficult question to answer. What I would like to do firstly is to find out exactly how many premises that we are having built, because there doesn't seem to be anywhere that I can go and find out exactly how many flats are being built, how many flats have got permission to be built. And I think if we could find out exactly where we are and what the ratio of people wanting these premises is, I don't really know what the quantifiable problem is. We may already have enough flats because there are people that are leaving. So I'd like to find out and see exactly what we have that is being built. There seems to me there's an awful lot of things in the pipeline and an awful lot of people leaving the island. So I think we need to find out exactly what the figures are.
Thank you. Guy Faye.
Well, we've just had a bit of a run-in in this parish about people trying to build on fields that we take seriously. And initially, when I saw this idea for temporary villages being built for foreign workers to come and work and have somewhere to live, I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. But then, of course, I immediately thought, oh, right, well, where are you going to put these? Because they're going to suffer the same issues as anyone else who wants to develop land. And there was also the problem of, are these foreign workers being exploited just a little bit more or not? And I think at some point we're just going to have to get to grips with this. We keep going further and further afield to find poorer and poorer foreign workers who are very grateful for the amount of money we give them. That's only one step removed from the slave trade. It seriously is. It's exploitation. Now, there are all sorts of other issues. I hear that a hotel down in Goree has got the rooms for the staff, but the staff can't get their visas. So there's all sorts of stuff going on, most of it bureaucratic. And I think we need to find our way through that, and that'll probably mean shaking up a few civil servants.
Carolyn Labbe.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, well, we definitely want a vibrant economy. It's no good just working and going home. We need the hotels, we need the restaurants, we need the cafes. We also need health workers and agricultural workers. Agriculture do tend to provide their own accommodation, which is great. Hotels, tourism, we had the hospitality Hustings last week, and it was suggested because, you know, gone are the days have all the boarding houses, the little B&Bs that people used to live in, come for the season and live in those. They've disappeared. They've all been converted to flats and what have you. So I think government is going to have to facilitate, not run it, but facilitate the conversion of dwellings for workers. And they've got to be a sort of one-up from the boarding house. They've got to be decent accommodation, en suites, providing IT and all the rest of it. So that's the first idea. So accommodation has got to be provided somehow, a student-type accommodation. But secondly, we should be looking for innovative type things, something like a cruise ship docking on South Pier, for example. I went down to, and staying there, and we accommodate workers on it. I went down to Gibraltar for a conference there with the CPA a good few years ago, and Gibraltar don't have the accommodation. and we all stayed on this cruise ship docked in the harbour. It was
Thank you.
great.
Philip Leclerc.
Thank you. I think it's like the old joke, isn't it? The guy stops the guy in Ireland and says, "Tell me the way to Donegal." He said, "Well, you don't want to start from here." I think that we've got to this position because we haven't trained and skilled up people appropriately. That being said, my colleagues have said that the same thing that I want to say is we've got to be careful we don't exploit people coming in. We shouldn't just bring them in, get our money's worth and then send them off packing. Because a lot of the population of Jersey came here on a temporary basis to work and established lives and contributed massively to society. We do need to think about accommodation. I know there was a proposition put to the States recently for temporary accommodation. I think that should be revisited, but the quality has to absolutely be right. I know of one developer over here when they came into the island, bought a couple of large hotels in Gloucester Street and put workers in there. The living conditions were appalling, absolutely appalling, and unacceptable in today's society. So we have to find ways to accommodate them. Temporary accommodation can be good. I've worked for SGB for a number of years in the UK. There are large construction sites with accommodation units on site that are first class. They're really good, comfortable, appropriate accommodation. We need to look at those kind of temporary schemes when we're bringing people in. I think the government does need to facilitate finding staff accommodation, especially in tourism, because there is a shortage. And it's not just there is not accommodation. There aren't the workers. There aren't enough people. There are just about every hospitality provider you talk to is having massive problems recruiting. I'm looking at Dominic Jones because I'm sure he's one of them. But I think decent temporary accommodation is the only way to tackle that.
Steve Luce.
I'm very clear that we need to be paying a living wage, and that's the first thing we need to do to help people who do the type of jobs in hospitality and in agriculture to earn more money, which allows them then to rent. I say that, and I follow it immediately by saying I appreciate that both agricultural and hospitality will struggle to pay the living wage, and government need to find a way of squaring that circle. And the way to do it is to adopt a scheme which has been promoted by Peter Lemaitre of the Farmers Union, which is a way of using social security payments to inject more money into those businesses so that they can afford to pay the living wage. So that's the first thing we need to do. If we can pay these people enough money, they can afford to rent a little bit better and afford to live a little bit better. There's a lot of talk about the number of people living on this island, but it's a really interesting conundrum that's already been mentioned. If there's so many people living here, why is just about every business on this island struggling for staff and struggling to find people to work? It's a really difficult one to answer as well, because we know that when we come to build the hospital, we're going to need 800 workers, 1,000 workers maybe, that's going to build that project alone. At the same time, we've got other major waterfront developments coming online, and we don't have the benefit of vast areas of land. It's certainly something that needs addressing, but what we need to do is to provide more homes for everybody and provide more affordable homes for everybody, homes that are shared equity, so that lots of people on this island can afford to get onto the housing market. And the more we provide, the cheaper it gets. I know that's not going to be cheap, still going to be hugely expensive. The more homes we can provide, the more realistic it is that these people will be able to afford to live here.
Thank you. Piers Songo.
Right. When it comes to sort of temporary accommodation, Peter Lemaitre has already been mentioned, but actually I've seen some of his new accommodation he's building, and I actually joked with him that he would be better off sticking it in the field and selling it for glamping, and he'd probably get a better return on it, because they're that good now. But this comes back to where we said about agriculture and the lack of investment in the sector, and that's the type of thing that the investment should actually be going towards, because a lot of the accommodation the agriculture built years ago, and I've worked as they've been developing, and they were old concrete one-room dwellings, and that was what it was at the time. But obviously we've moved on now, and the accommodation needs to be updated. It's not just temporary workers, though. We've also got an issue with actually recruiting in skilled staff into the island, because as much as we can talk about saying we want to upskill those that we have on island and retain young people, it's, sorry to say it, a lot of the time it's filling dead man's shoes. So there's not the roles on island to actually develop. But then to get somebody to come back, quite often they're at the point they're there with a family. So they don't want to come back to a flat. They want to come back to housing which is suitable for them. And that is a major cost barrier. Even myself, I've been trying to get someone in to join our company at a senior level, and it's cost prohibitive at the moment to actually try and get someone into the island, and you'd be having to offer nearly 20 to 30,000 more than the same rate in the UK to actually try and attract someone. So it's not just at the temporary level we've got the issue, it's throughout. And it's cost of living, cost of housing, and we just need to try and work out what the best way of actually finding ways to ease the pressure on those are. And I'm not sure if there is one answer that can solve it.
Thank you. I saw the lady with the dark hair by the pillar, and this will probably be our last question.
Hiya. Can I ask questions about fee-paying state-owned schools and what your views are? I mean, the last few years we've seen the financial supports have decreased, and with all these competing interests, you know, like you talk about income support, pension fund, like increase, money's got to come from somewhere. Do you see that savings could be made by withdrawing the financial supports to these schools, or, you know, decreasing the subsidies even further?
Thank you. Guy, I think it's your turn to start this question.
Oh, right, well, let's go headlong into this. Some years ago, the then Education Minister was looking at putting fees up for the fee-paying schools. As you might expect, it caused a bit of a rumpus. But the extraordinary thing was the abysmal level of education amongst parents, who started writing letters to the Jersey Evening Post going, it's an absolute disgrace that we're subsidising these fee-paying schools, not realising that they sent their children to the schools that are free. And what is it about free that you think isn't a subsidy? And that was the arguments that people were putting forward. Disgraceful subsidy. Hang on, you're getting free education. We really should think about whether we carry on with free education. It was introduced because Jersey people wanted their kids to work on the farm, especially during the harvest time. That's why it turned up. Now people don't take things seriously unless they put a bit of money into it. I would actually say if we're looking for more money to support education, it's time that everybody started to pay up.
Carolyn Labbe.
Thank you. I do not agree with Guy. However, the fee-paying schools have a role to play. Some people like to choose to educate their children in Catholic schools. Some choose to a different kind of education. As long as there are free schools, so there is a choice, I think that's good. And I don't know, I should know it, but I don't know it off the top of my head exactly how much the fee-paying schools generate. Now, if there's a mass exodus from the fee-paying schools because you're putting the fees up, then the state are taking on the whole of the cost of educating that child. So the state would then have to find that money from somewhere. So it swings and roundabouts, but at the moment we have choice across education.
Thank you.
There's a very good report that's just been written on the funding review of schools, and I'm going to cover it from the other direction. It's not so much, I think, that we shouldn't be giving subsidies to fee-paying schools, but what we should be doing is making sure there's equity and that the children in the free schools are getting the same crack of the whip. And just because a child attends, and I don't want to pick on JCG or Victoria College or whichever of the private schools, gets over £2,500 a year more spent on their education than a child at, say, Hope Valley or Grainville or La Roque. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think all children should have equal opportunities and there should be equity. So it's about ensuring that the funding review that's been written is implemented and make sure that children, wherever they are, and whatever their backgrounds or circumstances are, receive the same right to an education. Money should not be the reason that we don't educate people. It shouldn't be based on your ability to pay fees to go to a better school. There are some excellent results coming out of the state schools at the moment, excellent results, and that would challenge many of the fee-paying schools. But we've got to make sure that funding is there. And the funding review, I'd urge you to read it if you haven't. There's a very good synopsis at the front of it, talks about how we make sure that all children have equitable access to education.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens.
I've always been self-employed, pretty much, and when I started my life as a politician, I was a great believer in it's the economy, it's the economy, it's the economy. And in the times that I've been in the States, I realise now that economies are nothing unless they have people to work in them, and that means educating your children to come into the economy and be a useful contributor. And I'm absolutely clear that there's a role for all the types of schools we have in Jersey, but as I said right at the beginning of this evening, we need to make absolutely sure that every child on this island is educated to the best of their ability, and they get to do the best they possibly can, whatever that is. At the moment, we are seeing class numbers rising. We're seeing teachers desperately struggling to do what they really want to do, which is teach. Teachers got qualified because they wanted to teach kids, not because they wanted to push pens around pieces of paper all day long. And we need to get back to allowing teachers to teach. We need to get back to smaller class sizes. We need to get back to some more new schools because we've got a lot of children to educate. And that needs spending more money. So if the question is decreasing the support for schools, no, increase the support for schools across the whole board.
Thank you. Piers, Songo.
I'm fully aware that actually, as COVID hit, quite a number of people actually started taking their children out of the fee-paying schools and putting them into the public schools. Now, this is obviously putting real strain and pressure onto the rest of the class sizes, and a lot of our, particularly the primary schools, are already running at capacity. So I'd be concerned that if we suddenly removed all the funding from fee-paying schools, we would see an overwhelming need to actually start finding locations for building more schools and having to cover ourselves on that aspect. In terms of education, it's not just, we don't just need to invest in our younger and the school children age, but education continues for all of us throughout our life. And where we've talked earlier this evening about the brain drain of the island, we need to actually make sure that the education can continue on island throughout. And we've got some fantastic universities and different organisations now operating in the island, developing those courses. So it's important that it's not just the primary schools, the secondary schools that are well funded. We also need to make sure that the higher education and further education get their fair share of the funding as well, so we can reduce the brain drain out of the island.
And finally, Rose Binney.
Well, I think most things have already been covered about fee-paying schools, and I think there is a place for them. I don't think if everybody took their children out of fee-paying schools, we would be having to find more schools, and it would end up costing the taxpayer more money. So it's about finding a balance, I think, that the children that are not at fee-paying schools have these same opportunities as those that are. That's what I think.
Thank you. That was the last question. Another question would take us beyond 9 o'clock. It's quite an old deal for the candidates, as you can imagine, but I think you'll agree we've got 6 very good candidates, and I think they've done very, very well. Obviously, if you do have questions for the candidates, I know they'll be only too willing to get emails from you or however you get hold of them. They certainly will answer any further questions. And you're all here tonight because you're interested in the election. Please encourage your neighbours, friends, family to get out and vote as well, and see if we can have a really good turnout in this district. So thank you all very much for coming.
Could I just thank John for chairing this evening and doing a splendid job.